Tout d'abord, nous allons réduire la cible des permis d'études délivrés de 10 en 2025 par rapport à 2024 et nous maintiendrons ce niveau pour 2026. Cela signifie que nous visons à délivrer jusqu'à 437 000 permis d'études en 2025 et 2026, ce qui représenterait une baisse d'environ 36 par rapport à 2023. Deuxièmement, nous allons exempter moins d'étudiants du plafond. Ça veut dire que les gens qui n'étaient pas partis du plafond qu'on avait annoncé en janvier, c'est-à-dire les gens qui étudient à la maîtrise ou au doctorat, vont être pris en ligne de compte dans ce calcul. For those of you that are looking at the numbers, you will see the number I announced is higher as part of the first measure I'm taking, and that's because of measure 2, in which we are carving in master's and PhD programs. So simply put, the international student cap is here to stay. Certains étudiants étrangers sont mieux préparés pour s'intégrer et évidemment réussir au Canada, en particulier les étudiants qui sont titulaires de diplômes d'études supérieures. Ceci répond bien aux besoins du marché du travail canadien. C'est pourquoi nous réservons environ 12 du plafond à ces étudiants et alignerons le programme de permis de travail de post-diplôme sur nos priorités économiques. Over the next 3 years, and I think this is important, we expect these changes to yield approximately 300,000 fewer study permits. À partir ça c'est la troisième mesure, à partir du 1er novembre, nous instaurerons de nouvelles exigences en matière de capacité de compétences linguistiques pour les demandeurs de permis de travail post-diplôme alignés sur les exigences du volet de résidence permanente. A Canadian language benchmark, CLB, level 7 for university graduates and CLB 5 for college graduates will be required for anyone applying for post-graduation work permit on or after November 1st of 2024. We know that people that can speak the language are better equipped to succeed in Canadian society. This is a more stringent requirement that I think is very important if we are going to continue the successful story of integration of some of these people into Canadian society. Fourth, for prospective students applying on or after November 1st, post-graduation work permit eligibility will depend on the level of study. Graduates from bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree programs will remain eligible for a work permit up to 3 years. These graduates are more likely to acquire transferable knowledge and skills and be able to adapt to changing economic circumstances over the long term. Les diplômés des programmes des collèges publics, par contre, pourront obtenir un permis de travail pour une durée maximale de 3 ans seulement si leur domaine d'études est lié à des pénuries sur le marché du travail au Canada. Ces changements feront en sorte que les diplômés disposent de compétences et des occasions de travail nécessaires pour s'intégrer avec succès dans le marché du travail canadien et éventuellement faire la transition peut-être vers la résidence permanente. Over the next 3 years, we expect these changes to yield approximately 175,000 fewer postgraduate work permits. In the near future, we'll also take further measures to restrict eligibility to spousal open work permits. The fifth measure that I'm announcing today will be to further limit work permit eligibility to spouses of students in doctoral and certain master's select professional programs and certain pilot programs. And over the next 3 years, we expect that measure and these changes to yield approximately 50,000 fewer work permits for the spouses of students groups. And sixth, unrelated to students and postgraduate work permits, we'll also be limiting work permit eligibility to include only spouses of highly skilled, specialized workers such as C-suite executives, scientists, engineers, lawyers, professors, and technicians, or of workers in sectors where there are those key labor shortages. Spouses of workers in critical sectors like healthcare, construction will also obviously continue to be eligible for those work permits. As a quantitative measure, again, over the next 3 years, we expect these changes to yield approximately 100,000 fewer work permits. Again, I do stress that these are estimates and obviously will need to be tracked closely. Finalement, en conclusion, comme vous le savez, au cours des dernières années, le contexte en immigration a changé. Évidemment, il y a beaucoup de gens qui tentent et qui menacent d'exploiter, qui exploitent nos programmes d'immigration À cette fin, j'ai demandé, il y a plusieurs mois, à mon sous-ministre d'examiner la façon dont les gens, les visas, qui donnent des visas, prennent des décisions dans ce nouveau contexte, y compris les outils, la formation, l'analyse et les procédures utilisées pour approuver les visas de résidents temporaires. En juin de cette année, après avoir discuté avec mes collègues des provinces, après nos discussions internes, j'ai demandé à mon département de scruter à la loupe cette prise de décision face au volume qui n'est pas soutenable de gens qui désirent venir au Canada. Sachez que arriver au Canada, vouloir venir au Canada est peut-être un rêve, mais c'est un privilège et non un droit. Those measures that we have taken internally to be a little more restrictive on who gets visas, looking at countries where we are seeing people exploiting the visa system, that is to say that those that are claiming for asylum are not legitimate asylum claimants, is a challenge to the system, particularly given the volume of people that are looking to come to Canada. Again, as I said in French, it is a privilege to come to Canada. It is not a right. If you compare the numbers of people that have come in, for example, in one country where we have had some of those challenges from India, we have seen those visas jump down from around 50,000 in January to less than 10,000 in August. Again, these are preliminary numbers, but it is an indicative sign that the measures that we have taken over the summer after discussions with my provincial colleagues are working. There's more work to do. And again, there are a number of measures that we need to take to make sure that when asylum seekers come to this country, they get due process, but that there is no abuse in the system. And it is incumbent on the federal government to act when it controls the levers, particularly at the border. I want to say one final word on what I believe to be, at least at the initial stages, a productive working group with a number of my colleague ministers of labour and immigration, skills training, depending on the title they hold in the province that they represent over the course of the summer. At the Council of the Federation, all of the premiers got together and said that we needed to work as a group to deal with the asylum challenge that this country is facing and that a lot of countries in our position are facing, particularly with respect to the unsustainable numbers of asylum seekers coming into Quebec and coming into Ontario. All premiers at that time agreed. We, as a parallel process, had already started the idea of a working group with my colleagues from the provinces to deal with this. We asked ourselves a fundamental question as part of our working group was, what does a fair asylum system look like? That started first and foremost with the responsibility of the federal government to make sure that we are doing our role when it comes to bringing and addressing the number of asylum seekers coming into the country, but also the roles of the provinces that have the effective jurisdiction on some of the services that these asylum seekers seek to do their part. And they all agreed to do so. And with the chairmanship of the Government of Canada and the Government of Nova Scotia, we worked throughout the summer to look at different models of what could this system look like. I'm taking a little bit of time to give you some background because I currently no longer think that working group is actually helpful. I don't blame the bureaucrats in question. I don't blame the civil servants of our respective provinces and territories for having done their work. I don't blame my colleague ministers for putting their hearts into it. There was a lot of good faith at that table. But sadly, 3 particularly conservative ministers have stood up, the premiers of Nova Scotia, of New Brunswick and Alberta, and decided to weaponize this working group. They took a theoretical number of asylum seekers based on the last year's number of asylum seekers, divided it up by the population as they would, and assumed that the federal government would impose a number of asylum seekers on them. Let me restate, Ontario and Quebec are doing more than their fair share, and the other provinces need to step up. But there was no point in time where anyone said that the federal government was going to impose thousands of asylum seekers on unprepared provinces. I should probably give you the documents that they themselves leaked because it would probably be quite helpful for your analysis. But this was a productive working group that has been weaponized by three premiers in particular for their re-election or their leadership review, and I think it's really irresponsible. Those provinces come knocking at my door for more immigrants. They are responsible for about 20% of permanent residency numbers through the provincial nominee program. Quebec has the entire control over its permanent residency program based on the Quebec-Canada Accord, and there is a responsible way of doing things. This was not responsible, and they threw their own ministers under the bus, and they've made this productive working group much less productive. It doesn't mean we're giving up. I question the pertinence of this group, given the fact that the documents have been leaked. It's unfortunate, but I do think there was good faith around the table, and we can work on an individual basis with these provinces to see which ones will stand up. There's money on the table. There's over $1 billion that we've committed to making sure that we have a system that makes sense. There are countries in Europe that have a system that makes sense, and indeed the European Union has a system that, while they are facing different challenges than us, at least has some semblance of sense. So this is about a bunch of premiers who decided to weaponize the issue. Unfortunately, it's undermined the credibility of this committee, and obviously considering dissolving it. That's the last of the formal part of my presentation, but Randy and I are pleased to take your questions, which I'm sure you have a few of.
Thank you, ministers. Yeah, we'll turn to the question and answer portion of our event today. We'll do one question, one follow-up, and we'll start with Najoud Al-Maliz at the Canadian Press, please.
Hi, Minister. I'm hoping you can clarify a little bit about whether you're still intending to decrease international student enrollments by a third, because I believe that was the initial announcement, and the math is a little bit hard to follow in this current announcement as it relates to the previous one.
Yeah, Najoud, that pertinent question. What we did is we established a cap, and we said, provinces, you deal with it the way you want to deal with. And we've been asking provinces, indeed begging provinces, to actually put a little rigor into their international student system, failing which we've decided to step up and do it. There's a cap, so provinces can go under, like Quebec and Alberta, or they can consistently struggle with being over it. And I think that is where we kind of come in and play our role. We established a cap in January because of the recruiting impact that this cap has had. We are seeing a lot of institutions coming under that cap. Now, they will adjust their behavior. This is a turbulent year for post-secondary institutions. I certainly acknowledge that. The turbulence is something I think we need to deal with, and what they want is predictability. So what we're saying is the cap that we established, whether it's achieved or not in an aggregate level by every province put together, I don't control that, but that cap is getting reduced another 10%. We assume behavior will adjust. I've told post-secondary institutions several times that they need to adjust their recruitment practices. I have told them that the cost of acquisition of international students is certain to increase. So if they adjust their practices, get quality students, make sure those students have the means to stay in here, that's fine. But when it comes to the numerical amount of students that come into this province, come into this country, we have fixed that cap at what it was in January, folded in master's and PhD students, taken that number and reduced it by 10% for the 25 and 26 years. So whether those numbers pan out is not exactly within my control. All we control is the upward limit that it doesn't seem like people are pushing against at this point.
And follow up on a different subject. If either of you have seen the video of Jagmeet Singh from yesterday with that altercation outside of West Block, I'd be interested in your thoughts on it.
People on Parliament Hill and in our legislatures are called to serve. Regardless of your political stripes, you're here. People on this hill are here to serve Canadians. And we don't agree always on the policies or the approaches they take, but everybody should have the ability to come to work and walk around Parliament Hill free from harassment. And what happened the other day was not fair to Mr. Singh. And quite frankly, I think he handled it well. But we have to do more work to make sure that people in Parliament Hill, including our staffers, are protected. I have shared with the press gallery before that I have experienced this kind of harassment at my home. I've experienced it at my own barbecue earlier. It's not pleasant, and it's something that we're all having to get used to. But to not have a secure parliamentary precinct that needs to be fixed. And I think Mr. Singh was right to defend himself.
Much the same way. I mean, I think he has like a purple belt in jiu-jitsu and stuff. Like, so he shouldn't have to get a purple belt in jiu-jitsu to feel safe. And a lot of us are threatened. It's gotten worse over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And as much as as much as I was proud of Jugmeat standing up to this guy, it shouldn't have gone to that. There's a bunch of knuckleheads walking around the Hill with their own agenda. I think the sad part in this is that Pierre Poilievre continues to play footsies with these guys. His own members of parliament are out laughing it up and drinking with these guys. And that's you know, it's not a, this isn't an insinuation, this is fact. So Canadians need to see that in a clear fashion and see where it's coming from. I think guys like Pierre Poilievre need to repudiate this disgusting behavior by people that support him.
Like, why is the MP for St. Albert Edmonton, Michael Cooper, out there having cocktails with these guys? Like, these people have been arrested before, they've been charged before, they're harassing people who are just trying to do their work. That behavior is not acceptable. He should answer to his constituents for that.
Okay. Pamela Almeida Sumeo from Market News International, please.
Hello. Hi, Minister Miller. So the Bank of Canada a few weeks ago suggested that the government will not meet its targets for pulling back on immigration and slowing population growth. Are you seeing signs that the government is having difficulty meeting its objectives?
I think that, well, the measures, and they were right to say that at the time, because we had told them that our measures they were just reflecting what we'd already told them. So they're, you know, the measures that we announced, that Randy and I have announced over the course of the last 3 months, were not sufficient to meet what we had announced as a reduction of temporary residents from 7 to 5%. These measures today, according to our statistics, and we'll have to monitor them closely, will meet those targets. The Bank of Canada is independent, it can analyze it itself, and these are the announcements that they've been looking for. They clearly said in their release that they were looking for the further announcements that we've been working for over the summer. So we've the suite of measures and the projections that my department has put together are expected to meet those projections, and if we do things right, perhaps even exceed them. But again, we have to be very careful how we're adjusting these things, because it can have an impact on the economy, and we don't want to overcorrect, because that has effects as well.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, Canada's internal birth rate is at record lows. If we're slowing down immigration, is there a plan to find other ways to keep the population stable in the long run?
I mean, asking me to tell people to have babies, that's way out of my comfort zone. But I think the reality is we all face, as countries in our position, challenges with birth rates. That is part of the reason why we need immigration, and we are facing sort of generational challenges as opposed to, you know, electoral challenges. When as the Minister of Immigration, that is sometimes the top issue in my head. Even were we to have a baby boom today, it would take 20-some years to make these young babies productive members of the economy, which is probably the last way you look at them when you have birth. It's a beautiful event, but that's reality. So we would still need immigrants regardless, even if we had a massive baby boom for the next 20 years. We will need that. I think as I announce the Levels Plan in the 1st of November, that is a question that we need to address. The measures that we take are ones that are very important. This is a country built on immigration, but it's also one that needs to take into account a number of factors that Canadians have told us to take into account. I did a strategic review in my department over a year ago. These are things that came up repeatedly, and they're increasingly coming up in the public discourse. So the reality is that you have a particular view on immigration. We do have a responsibility to get it right, getting the number right, make sure that our measures are not recessionary in nature, and make sure that we are addressing these generational issues, which is the low birth rate. I think some of the measures that the government has taken with respect to childcare, getting more women into the economy, being able to take care, have someone take care of their kids, the child family benefit, are sources of that ability to be able to create and foster an environment where it is affordable to raise children. But again, right now, look, I got 3 of them, and I get a good paycheck. It is a challenge for people with children. We just need to make it more favorable, because we can't get out of this without immigration, and we can't have a birth rate that we see other countries going down as well with low immigration. You have countries like South Korea that are facing a wall and some existential issues if they don't address things in the next few years. Would not like to wind up in that position.
To put some numbers to what Mark's just said, as the guy that looks at the labor data and the economic growth data, 99% of economic growth in Canada is reliant on newcomers to keep coming to this country, full stop. And so the core of the Levels Plan is critical, and Mark and it's a delicate balancing act to get it right with the comprehensive approach that he's mapped out. But there's something else. By 2032, our entire growth as a country, population growth, will be based on newcomers coming to this country. And this is also against a backdrop. I'll go into a sector of the economy right now. 400,000 skilled trades workers will retire by 2032. It's the great tsunami. It's just happening. Demographics is destiny. The other piece, though, is that with all the building that we're doing and the things that we want to achieve, we've got another demand of about 300,000 more skilled trades workers. So you can see that we have a challenge of making sure we have enough people with the right skills to get the right training to fit into the jobs that are needed so that we can grow the country. And that's why Marc and I and our departments are working so closely together, and we have broken down silos between our ministries so that immigration and labor market needs are very closely tied together.
Okay, Marie Vestel, Le Devoir.
Bonjour à vous deux, Monsieur Miller. Ma question était plus pour vous. Vous en avez parlé au début de ce working group sur les demandeurs d'asile. J'aimerais ça démêler quelques affaires parce que vous aviez dit qu'il y avait des faits erronés. Qu'est-ce qui est sur la table exactement? Est-ce que c'est effectivement d'en répartir au prorata de chaque province? Je comprends peut-être les chiffres ne sont pas les bons, mais est-ce que le concept est le bon? Et on entend beaucoup les provinces qui n'en ont pas envie. Est-ce qu'il y en a des provinces qui sont ouvertes à le faire en ce moment, là?
Je dirais qu'il y a des provinces qui sont intéressées au concept. Il y en a qui veulent rien savoir pour des raisons, comme j'ai dit très clairement en anglais, pour des raisons partisanes puis malheureuses. Ce qu'on a, puis j'ai quasiment le goût de vous couler l'information ou de vous le donner carrément, parce que c'est facile. C'était des propositions, on leur a dit, puis ils savaient. Voici de quoi aurait l'air la situation des demandeurs d'asile si ces gens-là étaient répartis de façon par population des provinces respectives. C'est très banal comme mathématique. Certains premiers ministres qui sont partis avec ça pour dire que Justin Trudeau allait tout imposer sur eux, puis on ne voulait pas de ça, puis on n'a pas de demandeurs d'asile, etc. C'est trois nonos conservateurs, le premier ministre Houston, le premier ministre Higgs, puis le premier ministre Smith, qui sont apportés. Ils ont peut-être regardé les élections américaines, puis ils se sont inspirés. La réalité est tout autre. Ce qu'on a proposé, c'était voici la réalité, voici ce à quoi l'Ontario fait face, voici ce à quoi le Québec fait face, de façon consentante. S'il y avait une province, puis des demandeurs d'asile consentants qui voulaient travailler dans une juridiction, ils ont besoin de ces gens-là avec une certaine spécialité. Voici où on pourrait les placer, voici où on pourrait les loger, et ça aurait l'air d'une répartition consentante où le gouvernement fédéral jouait un rôle de collaboration. Pour l'instant, puis ça commence à diminuer, mais la plupart de ces gens-là arrivent à l'aéroport Pearson ou Trudeau. De là, dépendant du type de personne, ils se dirigent plus souvent que non vers Toronto ou à Montréal. On ne va pas les forcer à faire quoi que ce soit. On ne peut pas les forcer, je dis très clairement qu'on ne va pas les traiter comme du bétail, mais de façon consentante, s'il y avait des gens qui arrivent et disent, bien, on est demandeurs d'asile, on a besoin d'une province qui va nous épauler, qui va nous appuyer, qui va nous donner une job, un logement. Est-ce qu'il y en a une qui dit oui? Alors là, c'est là où on demande les provinces de lever leurs mains. On a des discussions qui sont en cours, alors je ne veux pas trahir cette confidentialité, mais voilà, avec la sortie de ces trois premiers ministres, ça va être plus difficile parce que ça va devenir un enjeu encore politique, puis du capital politique qui se fait sur le dos des demandeurs d'asile. Alors, c'était jamais une question de forcer des demandeurs d'asile à coups de milliers sur une province en particulier. C'est de la foutaise pour des raisons électoralistes dans ces trois cas.
Mais en même temps, j'essaie de comprendre, OK, vous ne voulez pas les forcer, mais vous avez aussi dit que si personne ne veut rien savoir, il y a des leviers. C'est quoi ces leviers-là? Ça sonne un peu comme les forcer, s'il y a des leviers.
C'est pas les forcer, c'est les leviers. L'immigration, c'est un choix. C'est un choix très important pour une province. Ils viennent à chaque fois que je les rencontre, ils viennent me voir pour davantage de pouvoir dans leur système, leur programme de nomination provinciale. Le programme de nomination provinciale, c'est un système en vertu duquel il y a 100 000 résidents permanents qui sont répartis aux provinces, puis ont le choix de faire ce qu'ils veulent avec. ils viennent me voir à chaque année pour davantage de ces places-là. Alors, je me demande, s'ils refusent d'assumer leurs responsabilités, est-ce qu'ils auront droit à l'avenir à ces places-là? Il va falloir en discuter. Il va falloir discuter des privilèges et des obligations qui relèvent de leur rôle comme province. L'immigration, c'est une compétence partagée. Il faut bien assumer la compétence. Puis quand ils viennent me voir, qu'ils prennent aussi la responsabilité de ce devoir. Il y a beaucoup de provinces qui ont levé leurs mains pour accueillir les Ukrainiens. Et voilà qu'ils me disent, ben non, on n'en veut plus. Mais par contre, envoyez-moi ce type de personne, avec l'excuse que ça pourrait avoir un impact sur le système de santé. Ma dernière vérification, un demandeur d'asile en santé vis-à-vis un médecin en santé qui se présente à un hôpital a le même impact sur le système de santé. Alors, une certaine hypocrisie dans tout ça.
David Thurton, CBC News.
Thanks for taking this question. I wanted to ask you some remarks that we heard from the Indian government. They have leveled accusations that over 170 of its citizens who've gone to Canada on student visas have died. That's the highest number, they say, than anywhere in the world. Of course, this is over a period of time. These more than 170 of Indian citizens. Any response to this, and what are you doing about this situation?
David, I won't respond directly to the Indian government, but it's clear that the people that come here, like anyone else, we got to take care of them. It's been pretty well documented that students, because of the precarious position they're in, whether it's housing or others, have impacts on their health. Some provinces are better than others in giving sort of medical help, but there is an impact on students' mental health, and all students' mental health. There's a young core of the population that's going through some important changes in their lives, and someone that's coming from a foreign country is often feeling very lonely. So, tragic to see anyone die. It's a general, and I've made this time and time again in a number of my announcements, but the mental health of these kids is important, and we shouldn't be demonizing them. They came here to get the best education, one of the best educations in the world, and the institutions that are making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 off them need to support them better, and we need to be there. Provinces need to be there.
Okay, just as a follow-up, I'm going to ask you about something else. It's about the news that we've heard earlier today that your Quebec lieutenant, Pablo Rodriguez, is resigning after that election loss in Montreal. And I'm just wondering if we could get your reaction to that, Mr. Miller.
I have none at this time. His future is for him to speak about. I can speak confidently to the fact that any decision taken by Pablo Rodriguez currently has absolutely nothing to do with the results in LaSalle Morte.
What tells you that?
I just know him. I mean, I've known him for...
All right.
I mean, no one really knows someone in life, but I do know Pablo well. What's that? I'm 100% confident that any decision about his own future has zero to do with the loss in LaSalle Morte.
Okay, Toria Isri, Global.
Are you considering further cuts to the number of permanent residents and or available slots for family reunification?
For November 1st for that.
But is that something you're considering?
I will. Well, I'm considering lots of things, but any reduction, I need to say, there's no discussion that's been had at cabinet, so I'm only one of the voices here. We're putting together a number of propositions with respect to what the levels plan looks like for the next 3 years, and those choices will be ones that we have to decide in cabinet. But you'll know on November 1st.
And then you spoke about this a bit in French, but what recourse does Ottawa have for premiers who, in your words, are weaponizing this working group and the distribution of asylum seekers? I mean,
they've voluntarily blown up the working group. It was helpful. I think the fact that they're doing that for their own political futures is disappointing, probably disgraceful, depending on your view on the matter. There's responsibility that comes with being a minister of immigration federally or provincially. Some premiers are their own ministers of immigration, so they take it that seriously. But some of them feel that some menu they can come take and knock on the door of the federal government and say, I need 100,000 more people for this, that, and that. 20% of the permanent residency spaces are allotted to the provinces at their discretion for permanent residents. They keep asking me for more. I got a letter from Daniel Smith wanting more. I got a letter from my counterpart in Ontario wanting more. They want more, but they don't want the burden that Ontario and Quebec are facing. I don't want to skirt the federal responsibility here. We do have an important responsibility to make sure that the system is a disciplined one and a fair one. But once someone is here seeking asylum, they need to be treated like humans, and that requires the participation of the provinces. So we talked about the provincial nominee program is one that is discretionary, and for those provinces that are responsible, perhaps they need more positions. And if they're responsible with respect to asylum seekers, they deserve credit for that. There's money attached to it. There's about $1 billion and change on the table. So a lot of these disingenuous tweets or statements said we won't do it without money. They knew that there was money on the table based on the documents that they leaked, if they even read them. And they need to look at them better, or at least talk to their ministers of immigration that I had a productive working relationship with. And they've gone and blown it up for their own purposes.
Tora, as Minister for Alberta, I want to chime in and just say I was very disturbed by the Premier's comments. Albertans have really big hearts. I grew up with our province welcoming people from Vietnam, welcoming people that were displaced by Idi Amin, the Ismaili people. In the 90s, a whole bunch of Somalis settled in Alberta. And thanks to Marc and Sean before him, we have a whole bunch of Ukrainians that have fled the war, the illegal war, started by Russia, who have made their homes temporarily in Alberta. And we took a lot of Syrian refugees as well. Alberta is a welcoming place. We're a growing province. The province has the ability to build all the schools, all the hospitals it needs. It has posted 2 years of record surpluses. Marc has been very clear that Alberta taking its fair share of asylum seekers comes with compensation from the federal government, and Albertans have big hearts. And to Marc's point, there's a leadership review coming up for Danielle Smith. She's playing to her base, and it's very disturbing.
Okay. Anne-Caroline Desplanques, Journal de Montréal.
Bonjour messieurs, merci de prendre les questions. Ça fait beaucoup de mois que le système et les entreprises, les premiers ministres réclament resserrement des mesures d'immigration. Pourquoi est-ce que ça prend tellement de temps avant que vous le fassiez?
Ben de un, c'est pas... ça relève du récent passé que plusieurs premiers ministres des provinces, et puis j'ai encore des lettres à l'appui, me demandent davantage d'immigration. Comme je vous l'ai dit, j'ai des lettres des premiers ministres des provinces, j'ai les résultats des rencontres que j'ai eues avec eux dans le contexte de nos rencontres multilatérales où ils me réclament plus d'immigrants. En ce qui a trait aux demandeurs d'asile, d'un, c'est un phénomène global. Et puis, le Canada n'est pas immunisé contre le mouvement de masse des personnes déplacées. On est à des records à travers la planète. Le Canada est un pays choyé, peut-être une des premières destinations de quelqu'un qui essaie de fuir l'oppression, la guerre. Donc, il y a des circonstances géopolitiques qu'on ne contrôle pas. Parmi ceux qu'on contrôle, je pense qu'on peut être très fier de l'arrivée des Ukrainiens, des Syriens, des Afghans. Mais ça vient avec des conséquences sur l'abordabilité, sur la capacité de logement. Et c'est là où, je pense, le bas blesse, où les premiers ministres des provinces viennent nous voir pour dire, bien, écoutez, on a des défis, on a des challenges, donnez-nous plus de responsabilités. C'est un va-et-vient. Les mesures que j'ai prises en ce qui a trait au visa mexicain était très importante, attendue. Ça a eu un effet, une diminution de 80% des demandeurs d'asile provenant du Mexique, donc ça a marché. Mais en ce qui a trait au... Il ne faut pas oublier que dans les mesures qu'on annonce au niveau fédéral, il y en a à peu près, dans le contexte, par exemple, des étudiants internationaux, des permis de travail postsecondaire qui viennent avec, c'est des bénéfices qui qui vont directement aux provinces, que ce soit dans les frais de scolarité ou les taxes que ces gens paient en travaillant 24 heures, 20 heures et moins. Donc, c'est des bénéfices aux provinces. Le travail de travailleurs temporaires à bas salaire, c'en est un qui est choyé par les provinces. Puis les provinces elles-mêmes, le Québec, à titre d'exemple, a triplé ce programme dans sa juridiction sous l'accord Canada-Québec. Alors, c'est beau de nous réclamer des choses, mais c'est une autre chose d'assumer leurs responsabilités puis de faire leur travail dans leur champ de compétences. C'est ce qu'on nous demande, puis c'est ce qu'on demande aux provinces. Il y a plusieurs vérificateurs généraux au niveau des étudiants internationaux qui ont dit coup sur coup que l'Ontario devrait réglementer le secteur avec plus d'assiduité, puis ils ne l'ont pas fait. Alors, c'est un peu de mauvaise foi de virer de bord puis me dire qu'il y a des demandeurs d'asile soudainement qui apparaissent au Canada, tandis qu'ils les génèrent au sein de leurs propres institutions qui gèrent eux-mêmes. Vous voyez le record d'étudiants internationaux qui sont eux-mêmes des demandeurs d'asile. Il y a de la responsabilité. Il y a de la responsabilité au niveau du fédéral. Et puis, ce qu'on ne veut surtout pas faire, c'est de faire un ajustement qui cause un effet récessionniste. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle on y va de façon mesurée. Les annonces aujourd'hui sont des annonces qui sont ambitieuses. Puis, je ne pense pas aussi qu'il faut attendre, puis il faut s'attendre à des résultats du jour au lendemain. On essaie de freiner un très gros paquebot, puis ça prend du temps. Simply in English, and I wanted to add this for those crunching the numbers, that I would say cautiously that we shouldn't expect to see significant results until I would say the second quarter of next year. This is like slowing down a big ship, and it takes some time to slow down and to turn, and it will take time. But these measures, I think, are important. The measures that we're seeing and that we took in January with respect to students are, at least anecdotally, with some data to support it, affecting rents, for example, in Surrey or elsewhere or in university towns. So this is positive, but we need to continue along this. And I was just saying, as I said in French, it wasn't so long ago, a couple of years ago, that provinces were crying to us for more people, more permissiveness after COVID. Like I said, we probably let this get a little overheated for too long, but there have been benefits from economy, including avoiding 2 recessions.
Vous avez parlé d'éviter l'effet récessionniste, mais la croissance du pays est au ralenti. Le président de la Banque nationale dit que l'immigration est responsable. Un trop-plein d'immigration qui a arrêté trop lentement est responsable en partie de cette croissance au ralenti. L'emploi, ça va de mal en pis, surtout chez les jeunes. Est-ce que vous prenez une certaine responsabilité? Est-ce que l'immigration a une certaine responsabilité dans ce phénomène, dans la situation économique?
Je pense absolument, comme ministre responsable, il faut toujours prendre la responsabilité. Responsabilité de l'état des choses, mais la responsabilité d'agir aussi, puis c'est ce qu'on fait aujourd'hui. Il faut aussi se souvenir, puis vous pouvez même consulter les documents de la Banque nationale à l'appui. Il y a un temps où on demandait plus et plus et plus davantage de gens. Il y a d'autres économistes qui ont une autre perspective. Je ne vais pas me rentrer dans un débat en point de presse sur les perspectives de ces gens-là, que je respecte d'ailleurs, mais c'est clair qu'il faut agir avec les circonstances qui existent aujourd'hui.
Avec les mesures que nous avons déjà mises sur la table en ce qui concerne le programme de travailleurs étrangers temporaires, on va avoir une réduction d'au moins 70 000 personnes qui vont venir au Canada. Ça, c'est le minimum. Et donc, si on enlève le programme d'agriculture primaire, ça fait une réduction de 70 000 personnes sur un total de 170 000. C'est une réduction énorme et nous le faisons parce que moi, je veux que ces emplois vont aux étudiants, vont aux jeunes, vont aux aînés, vont aux nouveaux arrivants qui sont déjà installés ici. Ça, c'est très clair. L'autre élément qui est très important, et c'est très important qu'on les pousse à faire leur travail, c'est que nous versons 2,8 milliards de dollars par année aux provinces pour la formation des gens, s'y inclut les jeunes. Et s'il y a des provinces qui n'ont pas de stratégie pour former les jeunes, c'est sur eux. Ils reçoivent l'argent de nous et il faut être des partenaires en ce qui concerne la formation des jeunes. Point à la ligne.
La vote 170 000, c'est pour le programme des travailleurs à bas salaire, c'est ça?
C'est à travers toutes les mesures qu'on vient de mentionner, oui, absolument.
That's all the time we have today, so we're going to conclude it there. I'm sorry, the ministers have to go.
What time is it?
JP, we're good.
You're good?
Go to Catherine. Go to these. Ouais. JP, on peut. Yeah?
You can? Okay. Your staff are just hassling
Trying to
me
get
go.
us out.
We have question periods.
All right, so Ryan Tumulty, National Post.
Ms. Rossino, you talked a little bit about the shortage in skilled trades that the country is facing. If you look in the high wage category of the temporary foreign workers, there are lots of people in carpentry, there are mechanics, et cetera. Is there an imbalance that is broader than just these programs in